Morning, good afternoon, good evening, and I want to give a huge welcome to everyone who's tuned into the Kev Baker Show today, right here on Truth Frequency Radio. You might be listening on iHeartRadio, TuneIn Radio app, so many different ways to listen, but it doesn't matter where you are because I really appreciate that you've taken the time to come along today, and you are not going to be disappointed because I'm going to be joined by two very brave ladies indeed. And today we're getting back into the covert and not so covert at times world of gang stalking, targeted individuals, and what are operations that are being carried out against people around the world. Now, you will know that I've done extensive work with Dr. Eric Karlstrom in the past, and he's brought so many of the documents along where they actually talk about the operations we will be exposing today, with two women that are really experiencing all of this firsthand. And Dr. Karlstrom's had to stop coming on the show for the next couple of months because as we got deeper down this rabbit hole, things around him in his immediate vicinity, and remember the doc himself is a targeted individual, well, things started to go from bad to worse there. So I want to send out a lot of love and a lot of energy to Dr. Karlstrom if he does hear this show. But that's the kind of subjects that we're getting into here, folks. And I remember, and I've shared with the audience before, that there was a time when I almost used to roll my eyes and think all of this stuff was just the work of people's overactive imaginations, maybe people looking for attention. However, that was before I had looked at the vast amounts of research that is out there, and not just documents, but people who are the victims of these programs themselves. Some of the stuff just is undeniable, and so many people, probably thousands, tens of thousands around the world, are living under this from day to day. So if there are any new listeners out there, keep an open mind tonight and just take into account everything that you're being told. So with that said, let me get to our first guest tonight. This has been a show a long time in the making. It truly, truly has. We started talking way back last year. And here we are tonight. So I have got with us Ella Free. And Ella has a background in advertisements, promotions, and media in various forms and capacities. Now, she became a targeted individual back in 2003 and became a passionate activist in 2016 after realizing she was more than a victim of male predatory stalking. She has a podcast called The Ella Free Show, and a podcast for targeted individuals. Now, she is also the host of a radio show called Whistleblower Nation, and you can hear that over on Revolution Radio. And that celebrates whistleblowers, giving them a platform for the courageous people who speak out against injustices. And she's here with us tonight. Ella, it's great to finally have you on the show.
Well, thanks, Kev. I appreciate it very much. I'm happy to be on this show and that you're giving Karen and I a platform to speak out and to share information about targeted individuals and hopefully gain some support from your listeners.
Absolutely. And there's so many targeted individuals that actually tune in to this show because working with Dr. Karlstrom, I was quite worried, Ella, that doing a show every month on this topic, it might be a bit full on. It might not be too relevant to many of the listeners out there, or they might feel it wasn't relevant. But over the months, we really did gain maybe a bit of a reputation to the point where targeted individuals felt kind of welcome in the chat room at tfrlive.com/chat. And it was a place almost like people could come together, fellow TIs who might feel so alone. They might feel like there's nobody they can turn to. And I think shows like this, shows like yours as well, do so much to help in ways that probably we can't even imagine.
Well, yeah, thank you. I think it is really important because so many people, myself included, are experiencing this phenomena that what occurs. I was being stalked, I was being surveilled, I was going through so much, and I thought it was the only one. I just thought it was a stalking situation, a male who was obsessed and not very stable. And he was going to great lengths to stalk me and to watch me and surveil me. even before, I didn't know that he was a dangerous individual, and we were on social media and talking in Messenger, and he'd wanted me to come meet him at some point, which I did not. But I knew people who knew him in California, so I felt comfortable. I'm like, oh, this is Michael's friend. And Michael was a man that I knew down in Los Angeles. I, really appreciated him, and he used to speak of this gentleman and say he's so brilliant and talented in technology, and he's in the technology field, but he also does music. He's like a prodigy piano player, and so I was really impressed with everything that Michael told me about him. But Michael didn't know him that well, and so then we were friends on, at the time it was called MySpace, which was a social media platform, one of the first ones, and and so. And I appreciated him very much, and he had some of his work on there, and I listened to it, and I just knew he was a really genius type of person. And then I joined Twitter. I found him on Twitter, and we were messaging, and I didn't think anything about it. And then one day we were messaging, and he was drunk, and he started saying or started writing things that had happened in my private home. And I'm like, the only way this guy would know this is if he was listening or surveilling me. And so I was very upset by it. And then I really researched psychopaths and stalking and what really makes them click and what makes them work. And I started, messaging him saying, if you don't leave me alone, because something started happening with my computer. I couldn't get on it. And I know he's a hacker. He had told me that. And so I figured he'd hacked into my system and making it hard for me to do anything. And then he messaged me back and said, those sweatpants are very unflattering on you.
Oh.
Chills went up my spine. And I was wearing sweatpants. It was not a guess. And I don't even wear sweatpants that often, and I usually wear jeans. And so I just started to get more and more alarmed, and I was still getting this computer interference. I thought he was just playing with me, wanting my attention. And then I just said, if you don't stop, I'm going to go to the FBI. And then I got a message back saying, if you go to the, and I didn't know if it was from him on that particular situation, because where the message came from wasn't him. And it said, if you go to the FBI, you're going to die. And I'm like, it's got to be him. I can't believe he's saying that. And I wasn't too worried. So I went to the FBI, and the FBI actually was on my side. I said, listen, I'm a foster parent. This is causing me unbelievable amounts of stress. Please help me. And they did. They go, what we're going to do is go into your systems. I'm going to call you tomorrow. Tell me which computer's which. Tell me about the laptop you're talking about, because there was one particular laptop that was extremely, I was having a lot of trouble with, and that's most of our correspondence was on. And so he did, and he said there's definitely some strange things going on, and he was so confident he could find them. He goes, oh, they always leave a trail. I go, I don't know, this guy's a technical genius, but he was very confident that they could trace it, but he couldn't find a trace, and the evidence I had, it was really hard to tie him into what was occurring. Although the FBI clearly could see there was some strange things going on with my server. We did a server report. It was shocking what was on the server report. A lot of dark web addresses, a lot of porn, and I started getting worried about that. I'm like, can they send porn from my house if they could see? And I was really worried about different things like that, and I was absolutely disgusted. And I'm a very strong person, and I know my rights, and I was angry, and I said, if this has got to stop, or I'm going to call your wife. And so, because I just went online and one of those things and found one of those people finders, and I found her number, and I said, I have had it, and I'm going to call people in Los Angeles and let them know what kind of person you are. And he said, you'll be sorry if you do that. Oh. And I did do the things that we talked about. Although my phone kept getting the busy sign every time I tried to call a friend of ours, it would just make this weird busy noise. But I'm dealing with a technical genius, and everything's technology. And I tried to order a landline. I said, well, there's no such thing as a genuine hardline landline. It's all going through Wi-Fi. And that was really strange to me. So I was really having difficulties calling people. And I just kind of gave up and went into, and then the stalking started. I was with my kids on the beach. I couldn't believe it. And these people would camp out next to us, and they'd all put their cameras up, and when my kids weren't looking, and were videotaping me and doing whatever they do. And I just couldn't, and I knew right off, I go, okay, this guy's hired these people to do this to me. But again, I thought I was the only one. And I thought maybe he'd use this tactic on other people that disappointed him. He's a man that has a lot of money, likes to be in control, and it's fairly powerful in that in the technology field. And so, and that continued, and I started going up to the stalkers, and I'm like, listen, I'm with my kids. Do you understand that? I go, I said, and I remember once I took a camera and I said, how do you like it? And I go, what if you were with your kids? How would you feel? And this one of these, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. It was a bad job to take. And other people, what happened though, when I started being more assertive, it stopped. But then I was laying in bed one night and I felt this horrible thing in my leg, like something like a stab. And I jumped out of bed and I go, oh, what was that? And then, and I knew it was artificial. There's no pain or sensation that can mimic this. There's just not. It's too painful. I thought it was a laser. I knew it was technology based. I thought maybe it was going off the Wi-Fi. I had no idea. And then I got another hit, and then the burns just continued and continued. And it was awful. And I tried to explain it to people I knew without understanding it, without understanding technology. And they thought I was going mental on them. And I did get incarcerated because I was just being honest. I'm very straightforward, very honest. Most people who know me know that. I'm a nice person, but I'm also straightforward. And so I was just telling them everything that I was experiencing, and I also was in this frenzied state. I was having PTSD, so I looked a bit manic. And so I understand from their perspective that they were concerned about my mental welfare. So then I just learned that I just need to keep my mouth shut. And so I stopped using technology altogether for a couple of years and was just doing arts and crafts and taking care of my kids. But I always felt like I was being watched. It was very uncomfortable being in your home, knowing because he'd mentioned seeing me before. And so I had a feeling he was watching me. And I didn't realize that sometimes people can turn you over to another group of people. Because at that point, I didn't sense him. I'd come home and there would be bookmarks in my books. He obviously watched me enough to know that I love books. And even after this, he put a bookmark in there that said, I love you, Irely, R. And I was like, oh my God, he's coming in my house even after all this, and he still claims that. And he would go in my books and underline passages, and it can only be him. I asked my children, I'm like, are you reading this book? Did you do this? And they're like, no, Mom, why would we want to read a book like that? So, and anyways, more and more things happened. My journal was open. Strange things were missing out of my house, clothing, pictures, stuff that, kind of strange stuff, lingerie, unfortunately.
You would be quite, you'd think this is like just a narcissistic kind of man thing going on.
Correct.
You really think at this level, at this stage, that this is part of some global, in its expanse, operations that are going on, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's global. So I'll fast forward a little bit. So then in 2016, I went on the computer. I decided to still stay on Facebook because I want to see my family and see my nieces and nephews growing up and stay in touch with friends. And then I thought, well, I'm going to search laser weapons because I was not having a lot of successful searches on Google because I was using the wrong terminology. And when the word gang stalking came up, I thought, well, I'm not being stalked by gangs, like I was thinking like the Bloods and the Crips and, those kind of gangs.
Yeah.
And so, and I put it in, and this man came up, said targeted individual. And it said, he talked about electronic weapons that feel like laser cuts and all these different things. And he was getting V2K, which is voice to skull technology, which is basically transmitted through microwave technology. And I said, can I please call you? Oh my God, I can't believe this is happening to somebody else. And he said, sure. And so I called him, and he's actually a fairly well-known Latino host, like a radio host.
Yeah.
And we started talking, and he put me in touch with a woman in Los Angeles that was working with FFCHS, which was one of the first organizations here in America that I believe was there for targeted individuals to give support and various things like that. And so I talked to the woman. I was put in touch with a woman. I can't exactly remember her name. She said, well, you need a buddy, and you need to get on some conference calls, and you just need to do your research. And so she put me in touch with a woman up here in Portland, and we met. And then there was a support group, and I met more TIs. And then I got on the conference calls, which I loved. It was like a lifeline. Although now that I've been in this a bit, I realize how gullible I was. There's a lot of different theories and explanations. And of course there is. We're dealing with invisible technology, so people have all these different ideas. And I was a little gullible and believed them all. And so it takes a little time to sift through it and become more discerning, which I did eventually. And that's where I'm at now. I'm pretty discerning. And it was just like, I loved it. I love connecting with all these people going through similar things. And so I started my own. And I just decided, well, I can't babble myself for 2 hours, every time I'm having a call. I need guests. And so I started being bold. I'm like, you know what? You've never been this bold before. You're always polite. I'm bold, but I'm not bold always towards strangers. And so I said, I'm going to start networking. I'm going to get some help for this community. And I got put in touch with I'd been talking to this guy named Dr. Seth Farber, who's a big champion for targeted individuals. If you're a targeted individual, you can look him up or you can contact me and I'll put you in touch with him. He gives therapeutic sessions. He's very reasonable. And my email address, by the way, is tiangel2016@gmail. And it's not that I think I'm an angel. I just felt like if I'm going to get through this, I need some wings. And so that's how I came up with that. And he had been talking about Bill Binney and Kirk Wiebe and whistleblowers, and I became very fascinated with whistleblowers. And they were talking a lot about the deep state, the corruption of the NSA, the CIA. And so I became very enthralled with that world. And so I called them up and said, and I contacted Sean Stone, who's Oliver Stone's son, and I had seen him on Jesse Ventura, and he had talked about, he was about target individuals. So I figured he probably believed us, and so I contacted him on Facebook, and we had one mutual acquaintance, and I believed that my husband's sister knew him, and so he called me right away. He was very kind. And he said, well, let me get you on my show. Do you know other target individuals on our new show? It was called Watching the Hawks. And so I put him in touch with people. And then I said, well, let me try and get you guests too, because I'm really going to try and get some people that can help, some big time people. And so I called up Bill Binney and Kirk Wiebe, who are very famous whistleblowers. I hope you guys look them up. And I know they support target individuals, and I don't know where they're at. I brought them onto my show, and my show kind of took off from that point on. These very powerful whistleblowers who really seem to be care about our community, and decided they were going to do a survey and try to prove that it was real through the survey. It's a symptom survey. So they were basically asking symptoms that TIs were experiencing. And since they've been very overwhelmed with all of it, but Bill assures us he just needs a little bit more time to go through all the information. And so with that data, they were going to try to get us help because we definitely have a problem seeing doctors and going to therapists in the mental health field, because they've all been told that we're delusional. And if they do know, I don't know if they don't really talk about it amongst themselves. I think it's a very limited percentage that discuss it, but we can't even go to the doctors without having issues. So you go in with a symptom, not only just for the survey, but when I'm injured, I go in with just the symptoms. I do not say what I think it is to see what they come up with. And they're usually quite dumbfounded when I have burns and blisters and injuries and the like. And to circle back around to Bill and Kirk, they just decided that they need to do what they could to contribute to revealing this. And eventually they want to have another hearing, like the church hearings. And I'm sure that you've heard about the church hearings through Eric. Yeah. And that was in the 70s. And what happened is they apologized. The government apologized for doing human experimentation, and it was not supposed to, and it was very similar tactics. So it was supposed to go away, but it's still, this MK Ultra still seems to be in existence to this day, or at least the tactics that were used, the program, so to speak, is very similar to what MK Ultra victims experienced.
And that's why I often say, Ella, is the fact that we'd be very naive to think that it all stopped back with the programs that we know about with MK Ultra. And it might take 30 or 40 years, but future hosts like us, future activists, they'll be referring to these times we're living in now. I don't know the names of all the programs they'll be exposing, but it's almost like it moved out of the military bases, out of the psychiatric hospitals, and into the real world, almost like a reality TV show. You know, they don't need to get you inside the hospitals or the bases anymore. It's everywhere, and it's all around the world.
It is. It's global. I realized quickly that this is a huge global problem. Um, and I was never scared. It's interesting. Some people are like, I'm really scared to do anything. But my experience had been that I was being harmed greatly and adversely, even when I wasn't doing activism. So I was not scared. And I was going to use everything I could to connect to powerful people and do what I could and try to become an activist. I just realized, okay, I'm talking a lot now. I'm talked out about it. I need to do something about it now. And I had come in contact with a wonderful man named Dr. Matthew Aaron, and he is a neuroscientist, and he is a targeted individual, or was. He was targeted in Canada, and he was able to escape by doing all these costumes and clothing changes. A very fascinating story, but his ended up he's still traumatized and damaged to this day. He was targeted very heavily, like Karen and myself, just extreme targeting. And he'd gone to Seattle, wrote a scientific report on his experiences, and then he found my podcast, contacted another scientist that I had interviewed who was also targeted, a very intelligent person. And he said, and Sean had said to him, the other scientist, you should go on Ella's show. And so he did. And we talked every day ever since then. And he's amazing. And he's been such an instrumental part of my ability to do activism and assisting the community the best he can from a scientific standpoint. And we started freedomfortargetedindividuals.org is the website. You're welcome to take a look at it. And we started because of my background in advertisement and media. I decided that, let's take, I started thinking about people because in advertisement, their perceptions, demographics, and I just started kind of trying to get a feel of non-targeted individuals and what goes through their mind. And I tried different things. I would go out and hand out flyers on the weekends here in Portland and try out different pitches, so to speak, trying to see how they respond, which demographics, which age groups are responding with more openness. And a lot of times, obviously, it's the younger people, the college students. And so we really refined a narrative that was easy for people to understand. And I do believe in brain influencing. I do believe in mind control. I do believe in chips, but I don't often bring that into my narrative, especially when I'm doing outreach, because it's all of a sudden it starts sounding like conspiracy. So we take the simple approach on the tangible things, and even the electronic harassment is difficult to prove. And so we started doing billboards. I hope everybody can take a look that we have billboards. We're going global, and we have had one in London. We're doing one in Poland. Thailand is next. We've been doing Canada consistently because that's where Dr. Matthew's from. So we've been doing plenty of billboards, and we did a train wrap. It was amazing. And we have this image of a woman looking in the mirror crying, which I believe that's the best way to create a reaction. Nobody wants to see a woman crying. They don't want to see a man cry either. But I just believe if they knew how many women were going through this crying and tortured and scared, that it might engage them on a feeling level. And it really did have a big impact in Canada. Canada people are like, Scottish people. They're very kind. People in the States are a little hardened in some ways.
Both on YouTube. And we know from the analytics on there, Ella, that people maybe watch for 2 to 5 minutes. And we do shows that go on for a couple of hours. So you really have to hit people about the emotions right off the bat. And I think an image like that, I hate to say it's perfect because of the subject matter that we're talking about. From an advertising and marketing point of view, though, to really encapsulate somebody new, that is absolutely genius.
Thank you. I had that image in my head. One thing that did happen when I found the community, I'm like, I'm going to have a billboard one day. And I was thinking just one, I thought if I'm lucky enough, maybe we'll have a big billboard by LAX where there's millions and millions of people coming in and out visiting. And that was our first billboard, by the way. And then this wonderful woman came to me and she said, I've been listening to you and Romola D, another person who has podcasts, who Karen knows, and has also had a series of podcasts with. And I want to give you guys some money and help you guys out and help stop this targeting. She goes, I came into some money and I want you two to have it and do what you can. And I was like blown away. I was like, what does she mean?
That takes up nicely to the break, because the break is almost upon us. And
okay.
After the break, we'll be meeting Karen. Now, Karen used to work for the NSA, so we're going to get another angle of all of the things we've been talking about and hearing the Ella experiences when we come back after the break, ladies and gentlemen.
Times are changing. The circus of politics, healthcare's low standards and high prices, and let's not forget food quality. What to do? Arm yourself with Life Change Tea at getthetea.com. In a world of chemical imbalance and poor air and water quality, it's time you make a move. Log on to getthetea.com and stock up on organic non-GMO supplements. Don't forget the tea. Cleansing your body never felt so good. And we have a brand new tea called Takedown Tea, which helps support healthy glucose. All natural body support so you can be at your best, naturally. All you have to do is log on to getthetea.com. That's getthetea.com. We're not a fad that comes and goes. We are the real deal. Join us and armor up. Getthetea.com. That's getthetea.com. Changing America's health one tea bag at a time. Times are changing. The circus of politics.
Welcome back to today's Kev Baker Show, and we are getting back into the world of targeted individuals, gang stalking, and all the other covert and not so covert operations that are being conducted against people around the world. In the first segment, we heard from Ella Free, an activist and a radio show host, and a targeted individual herself. And I think we all thank Ella for sharing with us the story of what she's been going through, and only really the tip of the iceberg. Now we're going to go to our other guest tonight to get this from another angle, another person's experience. And this lady's name is Karen Stewart, and this is her bio in her own words. Born in the late 1950s to an Air Force officer and his wife, we lived all over the country and in Germany during his career. Now, I had an interest in foreign languages and art, so I got the equivalent of a double major in FSU in Germany and fine art. When I graduated college, I applied to the National Security Agency to work as a linguist, to translate and report foreign material of interest to the government. And after a stringent background check, was hired in 1982 by the NSA. I lived in Columbia, Maryland with my husband. I worked at the NSA until 2010, when I was railroaded out of the NSA just 2 years before I could retire, because I had dared to ask the Inspector General to investigate a matter involving work credit and promotion theft. I moved to Florida in 2011 to get away and wait for the lawsuit, appeal to forbidden retaliatory firing, to be adjudicated by the judge Lawrence Gallagher at the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission in Baltimore. And during her time in the NSA, unbeknown to Karen at the time, she was stumbling upon some of the more nefarious work that agencies like that get up to in the shadows. So let me welcome you, Karen, to the show at long last. And little did I know, we really have been in contact for some time. We're both on a chain of emails that go around and around and around. It's nice to finally meet a fellow victim of that email chain.
That's one way to put it. It is very nice to be on. I appreciate it. I'm just very honored to be on your program.
Oh, no, the honour is all mine. And I always like to say I just want to give a platform to people like yourself, other whistleblowers, to cover as many topics as we can, really, to try and show people that reality, or what they think is reality, couldn't be further from the truth. And the people that we trust, the governments, people like that, they have got our best interests, nowhere near their hearts. So to go into these topics, I thank people like you, Karen, for really helping to get the information out there and shed a light on what's going on.
Well, it's kind of a duty, when you find out about this, you're shocked, you're dismayed. But you do have to tell people that, again, like what you said, that things are not the way they appear, and they need to know that.
Now, your time in the NSA, talk to us a little about that, and then how you fell foul of the authorities in there.
Well, I actually ended up getting fired for the best work of my career. It was about 2002 when President George Bush decided that we would be invading Iraq. And of course, at that point in time, we believed what we were told about 9/11, even though I had a kind of an indication that that wasn't so. But I was waiting to see what was going to shake out in that regard. But in 2002, we were supposed to be planning to invade Iraq, and I came across some material that indicated that, and I can tell you this because it was in the newspaper, so I'm not revealing anything secret, except that I had something to do with it, which the newspapers, of course, didn't say anything about. But I had come across some material that showed that a Russian company was selling GPS jammers tuned to our weapons to Iraq under the table, that we had before that no idea that they were making them, much less selling them to Iraq. So I began a series of reports that lasted about 6 months, from about May or June of 2002 into January 2003 when we invaded. And I basically was looking at the program and writing report after report after report about the testing and the development of these GPS jammers, how well they were working, the specifics, the specs for these weapons. And so people were just eating them up because they wanted to know about them. And it was very alarming. At first they said, well, who cares if the Iraqis make something like that? And I said, no, the Iraqis aren't. The Russians are. And then they got their attention. We said, uh-oh, that's going to be quality work. So they were interested. And like I said, I basically worked my heart out. I don't even know how many reports I wrote, but it was 6 months worth. And after the invasion, the Pentagon and the upper management at NSA came back to me and said that we estimated that your reports probably saved about 2,000 lives, which at that point I was, very happy that things had gone smoothly and that we had very, very few injuries, much less deaths from this. So I thought I had done a pretty decent job. And we got that news kind of in the spring, and people got awards, and a year passed, and one of my upper management said, well, how about we put you in for a promotion? And she said, I think what you accomplished was such that we need to do that. And so I was put in for a promotion, and my branch chief submitted it, and within a few weeks she got back to me. She said, well, I submitted it, but somebody above me took you out, in favor of somebody else. And I said, okay, that's, that happens. I was disappointed, but I wasn't devastated, and another few months passed, and a lady from a promotion board for that particular directorate, and I was working in the Weapons and Space Directorate, she came to me and she said, and I didn't know her, and she said, Karen, I want to talk to you about your project. And I said, sure. And she asked me a few questions and said, well, who did this? And she described whatever. And she, asked, like I said, a few questions. And each time I said, I did that. And then for one of the questions, I said, okay, one of the scientists I work with, he did that, And so she rolled her eyes at me at that point. And I thought, well, what in the world is wrong? And she said, Karen, she said, our boss and your technical director basically told the promotion board that all of that work was done by this other woman. And she named her, and she called her Rita. And I was stunned. And I said, so she took credit for my work. And she said, well, they credited her with all that work. I said, she didn't do a lick of work. And she said, well, the bad thing is that we not only gave her a promotion, but we gave her a double promotion. And that's really rare. It's really rare. So I was, you could have knocked me on the floor because I was so stunned and felt such utter betrayal. So, the woman left, and I thought, okay, you don't know her. Maybe she's got something wrong. maybe she is wrong about some aspect of this and it's not what it appears to be to her. So I started asking a few questions, and suddenly I found myself accused of something mysterious. I don't know what, but it would appear to be that I leaked something. In fact, the way that I was set up was the technical director, when I walked into my office one morning, she screamed from across the office, "Hey, Karen, your article about NSA computers is in the newspaper, in the Baltimore Sun." And I walked over to her desk. I said, "What are you talking about? I have no idea what you're talking about." And that was alarming because you don't write articles about NSA and have them published without NSA saying it's okay, because you can go to prison for that. So, of course, I wanted to know what in the world she was talking about. And when I got over there, after she'd screamed this across the room, I walked over, and then she whispered to me. She said, "Oh, I was just kidding." And I just was devastated because I thought, okay, now I've been portrayed as having done something illegal to, 20 to 30 people in this office. And so went back to my desk, very flustered, and sat there and began my work. And within, 15, 20 minutes, I actually got a phone call from NSA security demanding that I come for a polygraph. Now, when you enter into employment with the National Security Agency, you are thoroughly investigated. You have like a psych eval, and you have your skills evaluated, like your translation ability, your writing ability, whatever else that they need you for. And they score you on it, and then they decide from all the scores as to whether you probably would do a good job or you wouldn't. And so part of that also is every 5 to 7 years you get a re-background. Your background is checked again, a re-investigation, and you're given a psych eval every 5 to 7 years, just to make sure something isn't going wrong. And at that point in time, like I said, I started working in '82, and it was already, past 2002. So I'd been there a good 20 plus years, and so he sent me for a polygraph, and I was miffed. I was rather insulted, and I knew it had been because of the woman who absolutely lied. And so I went there. I went to security and sat in a waiting room and waited for them to come get me. And a gentleman came out and said, "Okay, let's go to a back hall." And there were rooms lined in the back hall, all polygraph exam rooms. And we stood outside the door, and we just stood and stood and stood. And I thought, what in the world? Why is he keeping us here? And there were 2 or 3 other couples in the back hall, and they were talking. And then the examiners would take the people into the room and then shut the door. And within 2 or 3 minutes, the hall was empty. And I thought, well, why in the world did we wait for everybody else to go in the rooms and just stood here? And he checked and made sure nobody was around. And then he leaned in my face and started screaming at me. And then he walks into the exam room and expects me to follow in. I did, but I was stunned. And then he gets in and he goes from, Mr. Hyde to Dr. Jekyll. And he's all professional and happy, as where he'd been really a nasty dirtbag in the hall. And then I said, I really don't want to take a polygraph from you because I don't understand why you just screamed at me in the hall. I said, you have upset me, and I'm very aware that once you upset somebody, that they can't pass a polygraph because it'll register that they're upset and therefore lying about everything, including their name. I said, but I will come back tomorrow or next week, but I do not want you as a polygraph examiner because, frankly, I don't know what's wrong with you. And at that point in time, he began threatening me and saying if I didn't take polygraph, he would call the FBI. They'd come up from Washington and arrest me. And at that point, I really thought he was bluffing because it's not exactly an unreasonable request to come back the next day and take a polygraph. But I thought, just my luck, they might actually do that. So I agreed to the polygraph. I said, but I'm going to flunk it because I can feel my heart beating out of my chest. And my blood pressure is, my pulse is very high too. I said, I can't pass it, and, he wanted me to take it anyway. I took it, And you usually take it, and a week later they get back to you. And then I got a call a week later saying that I flunked it. Well, I had never had a problem with a polygraph, ever, ever. So that was very disappointing. So I tried to call his supervisor and tell her what had gone on and really file a complaint. And I no sooner started talking about it than she hung up on me. She didn't want to hear it. So that told me it was indeed orchestrated. It was shocking to think that your employer, who demands such honesty from you as an employee, would stoop so low as to try to frame you for asking about whether somebody stole your promotions and your work credit or not. But that's what was going on. So they demanded I come back a month later and take another polygraph, and I did. And that seemed to be on the up and up. And I thought, okay, maybe everything went well and I'm good. And a week later, they said, well, it was indeterminate. I said, well, what is it that you mean by that? And they wouldn't say. They said, well, we want you to come back again for a third one. And by the way, if you don't pass the third one, you're fired. So I came back for a third one. And as I was sitting in the waiting room, a gentleman came over, a huge man. I mean, he looked like a football player. And he started to lean over me and say, so, this is the famous Karen Stewart. And I thought, what in the world does that mean? You know, and I didn't even have a chance to respond to him before another polygraph examiner came out of the back room and said, you know, I'm ready for you, Mrs. Stewart. And it happened to be a lovely young lady, maybe 26, 27, something like that. So I went to the back hall with her, and she started talking to me, and very, very kindly, very nice. And she said, look, I've gone over your files. And she said, I don't see a problem. What in the world is going on? And I said, well, it's a long story. She said, how about we do an interview? We'll just sit there and talk, you know, and then we'll do the polygraph. She said, because if you flunk this polygraph, you're fired. And I really would prefer not to see you fired after serving for so many years. So we sat down and talked for 2 hours, and I told her all of what was going on. And she said, okay, I think I understand. And she said, do you think you're ready for the polygraph? And I said, yes. And she said, do you feel relaxed and comfortable with me? I said, actually, yes, I do. So I took it. And after she finished, she started packing up the equipment, and I, you know, picked up my stuff and was about ready to head out the door. And she said, oh, Mrs. Stewart, by the way, she said, I'm not really supposed to tell you this, you know, quite yet. She said, but you passed. She said, you had no problem with this polygraph. And she said, and frankly, you had no problem with the second polygraph. It's just that we, you know, the guy called it indeterminate because you'd so thoroughly flunked the very first one. And then you turn around and pass this one with flying colors. She said, so he just wanted a third one to kind of figure out what the heck's going on. And I said, well, good. Then, you know, hopefully the nightmare's over. And I got back to my office and decided I don't want to be working for these dirtbags. I'm going to see if I can laterally transfer to another office. And they tried to keep me from doing that because apparently the woman who had gotten credit for my work was that she used that to get promoted to be my branch manager. So she was, I think, taking credit for a lot of my work, you know. So she didn't want me to leave at all. And so that became a difficult matter, and it took me months to transfer, but I did. And once I did my on-the-job training at the second job, which would turn out to be my last one really there at NSA, once I had done my on-the-job training for the new office, I decided that I was going to take the whole story and talk to the NSA Inspector General about it. So I did call, and I talked to a liaison with my new office who was from the Inspector General's office and told him a little bit about it, kind of the outline. And he said, oh, yes, he said, give me more details, you know, time, place, names, and I'll bring it to the Inspector General because that's exactly what we look into. I said, okay, fine, you got a deal. So I wrote up stuff and sent it to him via internal email, and then called him when I didn't hear from him. And he had absolutely, totally changed his perspective. He was very rude and nasty. And he said, I talked to the Inspector General. And he says, nobody cares why anybody's promoted. It's just all subjective, so don't bother us with it. In fact, within the next day or two, apparently this gentleman came to my new management, and I saw him leaving their office. And then right after he left, my new branch manager came out to me and said, Karen, why are you pursuing this thing with the inspector general? And I looked at her, and I was rather stunned. I said, justice? And so she had nothing to say to that, went back into her office. And I thought, wow, that man came down here and seems to have, because he left the office with a very angry look on his face. I said, he seems to have threatened my management for something that is perfectly legal to do. In fact, the federal government has a law called the No Fear Act, which basically means if you work for the federal government, you have every right to go to the equal employment opportunity people and complain about, sexual harassment or harassment because of your race or gender or whatever it is. You also have a right to go to the inspector general and tell him, look, I think this guy's stealing, or embezzling, or, doing something else, like maybe selling secrets or something, So you have every right to do that, but they were jumping all over me for doing that. What happened next was they called me down to NSA Security Psych Services, and before I could even sit down in the office with the psychologist named Dr. Wyszynski, and I'm saying her name because she's been in print before. Before I could even sit, she said, "So you're paranoid and delusional, are you?" And I thought, where did that come from? And so, I sat down on the defensive, and she said, "Well, I hear that you think people have stolen your work and your promotions." And I said, "No, I was told that by a promotion board member, so I'm just trying to find out, is it true? And if somebody's paranoid delusional, why don't you talk to her?"
That's a very good point.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, it's pretty bad if you can be held responsible for somebody else's delusions, if they are. But it's very apparent that she was pretty much saying, we don't want you investigating this. In fact, she said that if I didn't drop it, that she would go back through all of my tests over the past 20 plus years. Basically stood up and told her, I said, well, good luck with that, because I've passed every single test. And in fact, she gave me one there and got mad because I passed it, So, in fact, I informed her afterwards. I said, look, last year I did a baseline with the man who used to be the head of NSA Psych Services. And he said he has never seen anybody as emotionally and mentally strong. I said, so if you're trying to make me out to be a lunatic, good luck with that. So I left, So they basically found out I wasn't going to play ball. And that ruffles my feathers. I don't like to be bullied. Nobody likes to be bullied. But what they did next was they started fabricating secret accusations, which I really couldn't tell you, but I mean, it looks like maybe that, they kept on with the, oh, you've leaked something, which I never had. And then they started having people follow me. And I thought, oh, good heavens, And so they were starting to spread rumors. And of course, people are scared to talk to you because they feel like, well, if she's doing something bad, I don't want to be near her and then implicated, So I started having people back away from me. And one of the gentlemen that I had worked with in the Weapons of Space Directorate gave me a call, and he said, well, Karen, they're doing your reinvestigation, and one of the security people came to interview me about you. And I said, okay, that's fine. And he said, no, you don't understand. He said, the guy from security and I almost got into a fist fight. And I said, what? And he said, he was saying such horrific things about you, and then trying to say that I was saying them, that we almost literally got into a fist fight. And I asked him, well, what is he saying? What is he saying, for Pete's sake? And he said, well, I'm not allowed to tell you, but he said, but it's outrageous. And so he said, this isn't right, but I just felt like I needed to warn you. So they went on this crusade from about 2006 to 2009 to smear me. And they were also stalking and harassing me. But of course, I knew they were trying to get me to complain and talk about it, so that they could say, "Ooh, you're paranoid and delusional." So I just shut up and just kind of watched them do whatever it was they were doing, because it was just stupid. But then by late 2008, I think they were getting a little frustrated because they knew that I could retire in 2012. And I think they wanted to fire me and destroy my retirement. So by the end of 2008, they started doing other things. One was poisoning a pet dog to death. It was a beautiful Newfoundland that was only 13 months old. So that was extraordinarily upsetting.
Oh,
And
Karen, that's awful.
yeah. And then they started doing what I call coordinated aggressive driving attacks, which actually not only endangered myself going back and forth, on a highway between my house and NSA, but it endangered anybody around me. And so at the point that they'd murdered the dog and started endangering my life, then I went to the newer management and I tried to explain to them what was happening. And at that point in time, we had a very good relationship. And we'd talk and joke and it was just absolutely fine. It was lovely. And then all of a sudden, it was like I had leprosy. So they had gotten to them. And as soon as I complained about the two things that I just talked about, I ended up getting called down to security. And as soon as I got there, the security manager said, "Well, we're stripping you of your clearance, and we're putting you in a office where you just are going to basically process travel papers, and we're going to strip you of your top secret clearance that you've had all these years."
Well, just hold that thought there, because we're right on the break. This is compelling listening to your story. And you're listening to Karen Stewart, ex-NSA. We'll be back for hour number 2.
This is the Kev Baker Show.
Hour number 2 on the Kev Baker Show, and I've got two very special ladies here with me tonight. Both of them blowing the whistle on gang stalking, targeted individual operations, all of the stuff that we spoke about time and time again here on the show. And people say to me, taking a bit of a risk covering this kind of information, Kev, might put a target on your back, because you see so many people who do cover this topic, and no surprise, they become victims of these same programs. Now, that hasn't happened to me, touch wood, but once you find out about this kind of thing, how can you possibly not continue to try and help people who are out there suffering at the hands of these people, at these criminals? It'd be just as criminal of me and anyone else out there to turn our back once we've had our eyes open to what's going on. And it might not be you or I getting targeted right now, but that doesn't mean that they won't start eventually. And how can you not speak up for others out there who are going through this? So to help me do this tonight, I've got Ella Free, a radio show host, an activist, and a targeted individual. And before the break, we were hearing the story of ex-NSA analyst Karen Stewart. Good Scottish name there. I'm sure she's got some Scottish blood in her. Karen, before we got to the break, I was sitting just absolutely hanging off your every word, because this is a rare insight into, what can sometimes go on in one of these agencies that people like me like to talk about all the time. And I really appreciate you giving us your first-hand experience of what it was like to be in the NSA, and unfortunately, the kind of what it subjected to you to in the end.
Well, I was rather shocked, because you walk into a work environment and you know that everybody's been vetted. Or
now, Karen, I don't know if you've got maybe something in front of the microphone, or
okay.
It sounds a bit muffled. Sometimes it was coming across quite clear. There we go. I think we're right now.
Okay, is that better?
Oh, that is perfect.
Much better.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, I was saying that it was rather a shock because I'd been there so many years, and you knew that the people around you, nobody would pick your pocket, or nobody would walk home with your plant. I mean, all these people had been really extremely vetted, and you pretty much trusted them. You knew there was a level of honesty that had to be there. And then you find out that watchdog entities didn't have a modicum of honesty. So that was rather shocking. But anyway, they continued their attempts to get rid of me, and they put me in a travel office where I was given a red badge. The NSA blue badge was top secret, and at that point in time, they gave me a red badge, which is basically like a janitor or something. And when they moved me to the travel office, they stupidly put me in a location that was right across from the main headquarters of the security section. And after 3 years of being stalked and harassed and taking down, license plates and things like that, I started to recognize the people walking into security for their day at work as being the stalkers, and literally, really the stalkers. I mean, when they were doing it to me, I said, well, this has got to be NSA security, but I didn't have any proof it was NSA security. But there I started to see people who had harassed me the past 3 years walking into NSA security to go to their job. So I knew exactly who they were. And so I started taking down their license plates of their personal cars. And then at a certain point, I gathered up my evidence and went to the Howard County Police. And I said, I am being stalked and harassed by my employer, the National Security Agency. I want you to identify these people. And being something of an artist, I also drew some of the faces, because you're not allowed to have a camera. So, I didn't have a camera, but I would sit there, stare at somebody and memorize their face and then put it down on paper. And so I took this evidence to the Howard County Police. They contacted NSA, and NSA just basically had a fit. The very next day, they called me in and accused me of being crazy and dangerous and wanting to shoot the place up. And I just was absolutely stunned. And they basically threw me out and said, okay, you're going to be on admin leave because we just can't trust you to be on NSA property. And I'm the one being calm and rational and perplexed, and they're the ones being thrown into absolute hysteria and then claiming that I'm crazy. So,
Can I interject something, Karen?
Mhm.
One thing I've known about you for the past few years here is that almost everybody, minus one particular person, which you guys were talking about, loves you and adores you. You're such a solid human being. I don't know anybody who doesn't respect you immensely. So I'm just wanting to talk a little bit about your character real quick, just to interject that, so people who might go, well, was she doing this or was she doing that? No, Karen has so much integrity. She's such a decent person and a Christian woman. So I just want people to know that.
I very much appreciate that, Ella. I mean, there are
That's
a great
true.
number of wonderful people in this community, and I do appreciate that. Thank you. But yeah, I had not said anything like that. It was totally out of the blue. And so I was perplexed, but I was rather amused because they were being so outrageous. And so I said, they said, well, we're just going to have to, tell you can't be on NSA property, and you just basically have to go home on admin leave. And that means I got to stay home and get paid. So I laughed at him. I said, okay. So I went home, and the NSA personnel stalking had quieted down, shall we say, once I was taken out of NSA proper and put into this side job. And then when I got home early, apparently nobody alerted the people who had been stealing my mail. And for months and months, my husband had complained. He said, why is our mail all of a sudden coming not only late, but opened? And so he was rather perplexed because, he was taking care of all the bills and things like that. And when I got home early, I saw somebody stealing our mail. In fact, I noticed that and said, well, I'm going to watch and see is this one time thing, or have they been stealing the mail all along? And I kind of laid in wait and hid. And by golly, they were sending a different person a day to steal our mail, and they had a key to the box. So they had come into the house and taken, we thought, and this proved it, they had taken a key to everything. Our extra car keys had disappeared, our extra house keys had disappeared, and never turned up because they had them. So they were daily, basically stealing the mail. In fact, in laying in wait and watching, I would notice some neighbors come and put mail back into the box. And at one particular time, I had gotten the mail already, and the neighbor came and put it back in the box. So I went back to the box, and voila, new mail, even though there had not been a new mailman, So I said, okay, this explains all the mail that's been misplaced, lost, never gotten, or come open. And it also might explain why I've been sending Freedom of Information Act requests to proper authorities like the FBI and the Department of Justice and hearing not a word back, because they're either stealing my letters at the post office or they're stealing the responses. So that was absolutely infuriating. Well, that went on, even though I was on admin leave. They apparently went into the neighborhood and involved the neighbors, which rather astonished me. I mean, at this point in time, I know now that they had an arrangement where they went to the Fusion Center and said, we need this person stalked and harassed. And the Fusion Center had InfraGard civilians do it, but I didn't know it quite at that time. So that continued for several months. And so I started to go out and just kind of walk with the people who were walking around my house and trying to intimidate me. And I'd go there and pretend and to say, oh, hello, how are you doing? Nice day, isn't it? Mind some company on your walk? And of course, they would get extremely flustered. And so I would talk to them like nothing bizarre was going on at all. And I started to tell a few of them my story. And a couple of the people, they went from hostile to being very concerned. In fact, one of the gentlemen said to me, I can't tell you anything more than this, but he said, and I won't use the words, the exact words he used, but he said, I would sue the SOBs. And I thought, okay, he's pretty much admitting that that he's been told lies about me. So I kept talking to people and I kept causing trouble for them. And in fact, I think it was July 12th, 2009, the stalking program in the neighborhood ceased, absolutely stopped. And NSA had been trying to say that I was calling the police every 2 minutes, complaining about people, doing this and that. And I hadn't. I got the police records and they said, no, she hasn't, So they were anticipating that I was calling about these people they sent to stalk and harass me in the neighborhood, and I wasn't. I was ignoring them. So that frustrated them. But the fact that I was getting the word out to these civilians that, no, they were being lied to, made them stop the program for a while. So I'm one of the few people who had a phase 1 and phase 2. They did end up firing me for unjust cause, and I did end up filing a lawsuit. And I left Maryland, went down to Florida to await the adjudication of the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission lawsuit. And that lasted, I think I went down from 2011, and then in 2015, they started stalking and harassing me again because I had turned up new information that panicked them yet again. So they went to the Florida people and the Florida neighborhood and spread lies and had those people down there, the InfraGard who worked for the Fusion Center down there, had them start stalking and harassing me. Well, I'd played this game before and I turned it on them. If people followed me around in a store, I'd turn around and follow them back. And I'd make them so nervous, they'd leave the store, go out to their car, and I'd get their tag number. So this wasn't working out real well for them. So later in the year, in 2015, I had an encounter on Twitter with Bill Black Jr., who had been the deputy director of NSA when I was there, in fact, for 9/11. And I started speaking out about 9/11 because 2 days after we came back, and NSA was opened up after 9/11, I heard a analyst talking about the fact that he and the people in his shop had known for 6 months that those attacks were going to take place, and had tried and tried and tried to report warnings. And they were told by upper management, and General Michael Hayden and William Black Jr. were basically the director and deputy. They were threatened with prison time if they dared utter a word about warning people about 9/11. So I was stunned, absolutely stunned when I heard that. The man was standing in the hall crying, and he had about 3 women around him trying to comfort him. And I thought, surely there's a mistake. And I kept waiting to hear something that would tell me why he was saying that, but I never did. I kept hearing denials. Oh, we never knew. And I thought, that's a lie. But I had nowhere to go with it because NSA management was squelching everything. And you know, who are you going to tell on NSA, you know? So I continued to wait to hear something. But after they did all this to me, I started saying, you know what? People have got to know. So I did a radio interview on Twitter and talked about just that. You know, I had secondhand knowledge. And I also met somebody just before I was fired who basically told me the exact same story. And he had not been in the hall, but he was in that same office. And he told me the exact same story that the man, I call him the crying man in the hall, told. So that was several years apart. So it's got to be true. So I said that in a statement and did a very short radio interview about it because it concerns me greatly. And Bill Black Jr. basically on Twitter attacked me, called me a liar, blah, blah, blah. And I said, no, I can prove that I worked at NSA. And he said, well, you better hope I'm not the Bill Black Jr. Because I'm going to, you know, and I forget what he said, but it was a threat, you know, he was going to get me or was going to make me sorry or something like that. And then he erases all of the tweets to me. Well, within a short amount of time, my house in Florida starts getting hit with directed energy weapons. In fact, they were so strong for the first few weeks that it did electrical damage to several appliances. And I actually, it wasn't my house, actually. I was going down and staying with my parents who were in their 80s while my husband was finishing up his career in Maryland. So they are getting subjected to this, and we had no idea what was going on or why it was going on, but it was very clear very quickly that they were weapons. And just to make sure, we had a master electrician come out and take a look at the house. He said, no, there's no problem with the house. He said, whatever's going on is from an outside source. And, you know, I started watching and saw what they were doing. They had people who would get dropped off in the neighborhood. And this is Florida, so there's all kinds of forests and trees, and, you know, it's very dense with flora. And so they're having people dropped off at dusk. They'd run into the woods with some kind of box. And when midnight came around, they would basically hit the house with it until dawn. And it was horrific. In fact, I realized that they were, you know, targeting me specifically. So I actually ended up sleeping in the laundry room on the other side of the house from my parents so that it wouldn't be so strong hitting them. So I tried to explain what was going on to the local police, the local sheriff's department, and that was absolutely a waste of time. They were either too unsophisticated and unknowledgeable about it, or the people above them, the higher ups, were complicit. And so that was unfortunately a waste of time. But during those months where I was getting hit in Florida, I developed eye damage, was told that I had bleeding in the brain, and had heart damage from these directed energy weapons. So I will tell you that they are not a joke. And I had been, at that point in time, about 58, 59 years old, exceedingly good health. In fact, I tell people I had obscenely good health, being a non-smoker, non-drinker, no drugs whatsoever, and just was a big walker. You know, I had big dogs, and we just took off and hiked and walked everywhere. So I was in exceptionally good health until I was hit with the directed energy weapons. So these things are, I think they're kind of surprised they didn't kill me, but instincts kicked in, and I started to figure out adequate, not great, but adequate shielding, which a lot of people do ask me about it. And I tell them not a electrician, so it's really amateur night when I tell you what I use. But until you can find that electrician that can really help you, it might save your life. So I went through that in Florida, and some other complications. I don't know if you want me to tell you about them or not, but I tried to.
Let me bring Ella back in here as well, because you speak to a lot of other targeted individuals with the hotline, also your radio show. I mean, these direct energy weapons, are they quite a common story for all the victims, or is it just certain cases?
It seems like 90% reported, but some people aren't exactly sure if it's happening. For me and for many others, it's undeniable. It's like being electrocuted, depending on the strength, tasered. I mean, it's so painful. But there's other people that say that, I felt a warm sensation, or so. It's kind of tricky to say, but I know like half the people do report very obvious assaults from these weapons.
I'd say a lot, yes.
A lot of them, yeah. But it what varies is the strength, if they're burned or not. Microwaves can be modulated in so many different capacities for certain. You just change the I'm forgetting the lingo here. You just change the wave, the length of the wave, and microwaves can do so many things. People are unaware of it, and I think it's all radio frequencies, so they can be modulated to do certain things. But there are people that just suspect it. Let's just say that there is. Most of the people suspect it, and I'd say half are positive of it.
Yeah, and I think, Karen, I live in Glasgow over in Scotland, and I was telling Ella just before you joined us that we have the pleasure of being Britain's first smart city. So that brings with it a lot of technology, 5G as well. And I was going to ask you, how does the 5G tie in with all of this? Because I've got a funny feeling that for targeted individuals and the way that they do those things, 5G must be really, really a fear, because they'll be able to utilize this, right?
I believe so.
Yeah.
Karen, you know more than me on this topic, so I'm going to let you.
I was going to say what I had read is that the 5G employs a wavelength or frequency that is known to be a weapon. Which is very scary.
Yes, this millimeter wave they call it, isn't it?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So it's. It's way overpowered, and unfortunately, there has been some talk about using it as a population culling device, which is horrible. It really is horrible. And you think about Wi-Fi in the schools and having it in the houses, and then you're looking at generations that will not properly reproduce. And then you've got
we're not meant to be living in an electromagnetic soup like this.
No.
Absolutely. Normal. And who knows what the long-term effects are to our DNA, to our existence, because really right now we're in unprecedented grounds. And they know, I think, fine well what they're doing with these frequencies, Ella. And you've even got a video. I've seen this before the show, and I'm really keen to get this out there because, we talk about these people that are doing the gang stalking, the street theatre, sometimes we call it as well. And never did I imagine I would see one of them actually admitting to the crimes he's carrying out. But you've got a video that shows that, right?
Mm-hmm. I think they caught him off guard. And as I said, some of these guys that they hire are not exactly geniuses. And for whatever reason, and then the guy who was being stalked is a little intimidating from the sounds of it. So he did confess.
Yeah, it's good. I'm going to post that in the chat room for people to see.
Okay.
And if I come back to you as well, Karen, how's things for you now? Are you still being targeted? Because you certainly speak out, you're very public, you're coming on shows like this and helping to really expose what's going on. So I imagine that really still puts a crosshair on you, right?
Yes, it actually has not stopped since it started again in late 2015. It hasn't stopped. In fact, well, I should say it stopped for about 1 hour in the last 4 years.
Dear Lord.
And that was very interesting enough. I went into a fusion center in Tallahassee, Florida, in order to give them a report. I essentially treated it like it was a report for NSA. I sat and wrote everything I've observed and all of my conclusions and wrote it up into a report and gave it to the people at the fusion center. And while I was waiting to talk to them, well, actually, when I drove into the parking lot of the fusion center, the directed energy weapons attack on me stopped. And people had, if you leave your house, and they put people on your tail who have these weapons powered by the cars, and you can actually tell a difference in strength, whether it's a 4-cylinder, 6-cylinder, or 8-cylinder. So you know it's being powered by the car engine. So when I drove into the parking lot at the Fusion Center, all of a sudden it stopped. And I went into the Fusion Center and sat there waiting for half an hour, 45 minutes to be seen, enjoying the fact that I was, for the first time in months, not being hit. And that, to me, that showed conclusively that the gang stalkers were connected with the Fusion Center people, because when I went into the police department, it didn't stop there. They didn't care about the police. They didn't care if they harmed them. But when I went to the Fusion Center, oh, that stopped.
Wow.
And then as soon as I left, it started again.
And you know, people out there might be thinking, well, what gets one targeted? And this is why it's really kind of good. Yeah, this is why it's really good to have two really kind of separate stories going on here tonight, because it's easier to see why Karen fell victim to this. And then you think back to Ella's story. And this is my point I want to prove, is it can be absolutely anyone, whether you've done something or not. There's no one thing you can put your finger on, Ella, that makes you a target. It's just random. It's anyone, and it's becoming more and more people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is. And I've talked to thousands of people, and I'm sure Karen has as well at this point. Mm-hmm. And they're just normal people. They're like, I'm not special. I don't even know why this is happening. There's a good portion of people who don't know why it's happening to them. And then there's a community of people or a portion of the community that suspect who's happening to it. And there's, of course, a percentage that's pretty positive what's happening, or who's behind it all, we should say.
Absolutely. And when we come back after the break, I'll get Karen hopefully to share with us some techniques, some of her DIY electrician work, so that we can offer maybe some people out there who need some protection, some kind of solutions to this as well, because it's all very well talking about the problem, but we need to find out where people can go and how we can really help people out there tonight that might be targeted, just like Ella and like Karen here. So please join us after the break for that. And then coming up after tonight's show, Lucky and Dr. Brooks Agnew will be on the way. So please join me after the break as we get back into it with Ella and Karen. Don't go anywhere.
Thank you, Kev.
This is the Kev Baker Show.
I have got Ella Free and ex-NSA analyst Karen Stewart on the show with us here tonight, and we've been talking about targeted individuals. Not a new subject for the Kev Baker Show, but something that over the months and years that I've been talking about this, and Ella, I want to come to you on this point as well, because I think we both agree here that maybe, I don't know if they're kind of turning up the heat a little bit, almost dialing things up, or people are becoming more brave and coming forward. But it certainly seems like more and more people are either suffering from this at this time, and definitely more and more people becoming aware of the problem.
Yes, I do think that it's exponentially increasing, at least in the few years that I've been here. I just get calls just every day from new targets, and it's just quite extraordinary. And we have that phone number on our website. If you feel as if you might be targeted, or if you know, like you're hearing the show and you realize, wow, that's what's going on with me, you can get the phone number from our website, freedomfortargetedindividuals.org. It's also on targetedjustice.com. So it's really I think that because this is like the perfect crime, maybe that's why these tactics are being implemented by criminal networks, criminal groups, and the government, or the covert aspects of the government. So because it's the perfect crime, why wouldn't it be increasing? It's so hard to get caught. I mean, it's so hard to be caught for these crimes, committing these crimes. And it just makes sense to me that it's time that they do something about this. And it's very difficult. I mean, you see people and they have burns on their body, and it's difficult to prove how it's happening. The who, what, when, and where, and how is very difficult in
Absolutely.
regards to these crimes.
Yeah, and I mean, what a perfect tool of control as well. And Karen, coming back to you, I think we both agree on the fact that these kind of operations, they're only set to expand. And it is the ultimate tool of control if you could have a populace under this kind of electronic harassment. And, you know, that would be like on a prison planet, only with invisible bars, right?
Mhm.
Exactly so. I mean, I think there's multiple reasons. One is that unfortunately that the UN and other people think that there are too many human beings on the earth, and this is a perfect tool to cull them, because you're giving people what looks like natural causes to die from, you know, like bleeding in the brain like I had, or a heart attack from a stiffening heart that's being cooked, or blood cancers, or just outright killing them with a stroke or a heart attack during a particularly bad episode. And they do try to make it worse at night, because when your sleep is disturbed, then you don't heal correctly for the day, and you die faster. So they are especially bad at night for a reason. They also will shift the types of waves they hit you with. It might be electromagnetic, or it might be more microwave, or it might be radio frequency, you know, switched every 6 to 7 weeks, because there seems to be some kind of protocol where they're trying to break your body down. And there are different delivery systems for these weapons. The mobile directed energy unit, you know, which can be sitting in your neighbor's home or in their yard aimed at you, or it could be somebody in the neighborhood who has a laptop or desktop who's directing a signal from a nearby cell tower, or a nearby, or not, well, you can't have a nearby satellite, but a satellite passing overhead, and they can direct a signal from that origin, that source, that basically goes from the computer into a transducer, which they have planted perhaps near your home, which you'll never find. And that takes a signal and it turns it into a weaponized wave that hits you. And so, and another thing that they do that I found out only actually a couple years ago, and I've been targeted like 3 this second go around, 3 to 4. And what they will do is they're pretty notorious for coming into your homes when you're away, and they can get through almost any lock that you can even think of. But I found out that they are coming into the homes and they are doing reverse polarity in your electrical system, so that essentially you're living in a house that's full of dirty electricity. So that is yet another weapon in their arsenal that's horrendous. You know, I mean, not many of us are trained in electricity so that would be able to reverse that or even find it. So that's yet another problem. But I wanted to speak to shielding. I mean, one of the first things that you use when you find out you're being hit with something like this is you run for the aluminum foil, you know.
I'm thinking of building myself a Faraday cage at this point.
Yeah, that's the more sophisticated viewpoint, but of course people don't know what's going on, so they run for the aluminum foil. And I would say that if it starts happening to you and you obviously don't have time to research anything, I've been told that aluminum foil is surprisingly porous, so that if you want to use it for a temporary fix, that you should use 7 to 12 layers, you know, until you can get something better. And I've been told and have used like Mylar, and you get gator clips and you ground the Mylar, you put it all over the walls and ceiling. Now, some of the things that are smaller that I find effective are something called, and I hate to give a brand name, but it's a unique one. It's Yoshi brand grill sheets, which if you're grilling, you know, you have an outdoor grill and you're cooking meat and you you're cooking vegetables. So the vegetables are going to fall through the bars, right? So you get a grill sheet and you cook the vegetables on the grill sheet, but it of course has to be heat resistant. Well, these Yoshi brand are copper infused grill sheets, and they are heat resistant up to about 500 degrees. Now, these weapons do damage because they cook you. So what you're looking for is heat resistant. And if you have something that's hitting you that is more in the line of a laser, then you want mirrors. And also some of the, you can get highly strong magnets that deflect some of these waves, because some of them come directly from the weapon to you. But if you have magnets all over the house, then they cannot hit you directly because they're being their pathways being distorted by the magnets. So I actually avoided V2K when they first tried to start doing that to me, because in the bedroom I was using, I had mirrors everywhere pointing outward, of course, not toward me, but out toward the weapons. I had magnets everywhere, and I just had reflective and heat resistant materials everywhere. And they tried to do the V2K, which is a voice to skull, or called also the weapon of God. Basically it sends and it can send audio. You can get pictures of something sent to your head, unfortunately, and you can also get voices that is sent into your skull, which is, I'm sure, horribly painful, if not disturbing. But what I was hearing was in the room, and I would look and say, where's that voice coming from? And I realized, no, that's they couldn't hit you with it because of all the magnets and mirrors in the room. So it rather deflected it, and they've never been able to do it. So that's helped me tremendously. I just thank God I don't have that garbage, because it can actually do brain damage. Vladimir Putin, president of Russia, said that he knew the Soviet Union was trying to use the V2K to communicate with their spies in Western Europe, but they found out that they were giving their own spies brain damage, so they stopped.
And of course, that incident in Cuba not long ago as well, right, where the diplomats, they started suffering from migraines and feeling sick, and that was sonic weapons, was it not?
Well, they called them sonic. Go ahead, Ella.
I was going to say it depends on what you're reading, because some will specify microwave, and that's an after the fact. Then there were just mystery illness title, and they did say sonic. And so, but most people call it a mystery attack most recently, but it's microwave. I mean, most of us can agree to that, that it's definitely microwave, I suppose. What do you think, Karen?
Well, I think so too, because the microwave definitely has a sound that accompanies it if you have good hearing.
Mm-hmm.
Then it's a very high pitched, and the human ear can only hear up to about 20,000 hertz, and most cannot even hear up to that. So we're probably looking at something at 15 or 16,000 hertz, and that probably goes very well with the microwave. In fact, 3 neurologists across the United States, I think it's Beatrice Gollum and Douglas Smith, and I forget his first name, but his last name is Hoffer. So one in California, one in Pennsylvania, and one in Florida. They're all saying essentially what they're hearing reported, and the symptoms that the victims are reporting make it seem to them like these are microwave weapons.
And the earlier media reports attributed these incidents to mass hysteria, but police. And this is interesting because these are embassy workers, and but there was actually evidence, because what they found when they were tested is traumatic brain injuries without blunt force trauma. And these are confirmed medical diagnoses. They did MRI scans, like a C-SPAN, is that what it's called? And almost all the victims described like the audio, the high-pitched ringing, and the ear damage occurs like a high-pitched ringing, and it's very continuous, and it varies. Sometimes it's very high and sometimes it's very loud, but that is something very common amongst target individuals. But don't be afraid if you're on there and you're listening to this. Just because you get tinnitus may not mean that you're targeted. Sometimes people get it periodically, but it's not a very consistent thing, and it's rather quiet too. And sometimes it has to do with electrical stimuli, loud music, and things like that.
You know, again, that's kind of, they're so discreet about the way they go about this that it can be mistaken for tinnitus. And, you know, like you were saying earlier, Ella, going to the doctor as well, it can appear like it's just maybe on the borderline between something real and maybe being paranoid about something else. And again, that's part of their tactics, right? That in itself must be so infuriating.
Oh, yeah, it is. When you first try to tell people about this, I mean, Karen maybe was a little more nice about it, but I was so upset. I'm like, all you people have trusted me and you come to me for advice, and you know I'm a solid, I guess people have always thought me to be like a very solid friend, and I hope so. I am there for my friends, and I'm a very grounded person, people have said. Some people will say you're a little bit of a straight shooter, like I can be a little bit blunt sometimes, but I've been very concerned and caring. I actually was a drug and alcohol counselor, and I was a therapeutic foster parent. So, but there are people in that field that shouldn't be working in that field. But you have to pass certain tests. You have to be interviewed by people. You have to pass panels. They really check parents out for being foster parents. So I passed everything. So it was very upsetting to me, and I'm sure to Karen too, that I couldn't get the support I needed, and it makes me angry when I talk to new target individuals and they're getting that as well. But with that said, occasionally there is the person who just wants to be a target individual because they may actually have something wrong with them. It's rare, but occasionally I'll speak to a person that I feel may not actually be a targeted individual, but they are paranoid. Or on meth, or I can because I've been worked in the drug field in recovery. I can usually tell if someone's on something. But even people who are true targeted individuals sometimes turn to drugs or alcohol to deal with this and to cope.
And what about now? Are you still being targeted right now?
Yes, it's been going on. It started in 2003, but the surveillance and the stalking started in 2003, but it actually started in 2011 with the gang stalking, and it's been very severe. And there was times I didn't know if I was going to be able to deal with it, but I cope okay. And I think just taking it day by day, and this goes to anybody suffering or enduring anything, you just got to make it through the day. Don't worry about a year. If I think about, oh my God, if I'm targeted a year from now, I don't want to deal with this. I don't want to be here. And a lot of people will say that to me. And I'm like, you don't have to worry about a year from now. We're all fighting. We're doing media. This is becoming more and more popular of a topic. Just deal with today. Try to do something nice for yourself. Get grounded, get outside, get your feet on the ground, because as we were just talking about all this 5G and all this electrifying the body is electrical, but it's not healthy with everything going on. So you need to get outside no matter who you are and get grounded and get that, almost like it's called grounding, and it's very clearing for the body. And we need to take care of ourselves and take supplements, especially if you're being continually damaged. And I'm traumatized every single day, but it's the strangest thing. The human beings adapt if you have the right personality. And I feel empowered by doing activism and being there for others. And I feel very positive and hopeful because this is starting to break. And, and to all the people listening who are not target individuals, this is really important. We need you. I think the only way this is actually going to stop is to get you to root for us and to talk to people. Get this to be a conversation. You can go to freedomfortargeted.individuals.org. It's a very simplified version of a very complicated program on that website. And there are cited handouts. There's a short version and a long version. I think anybody would understand this particular handout. And it is up to you guys. We're counting on you, the listeners, to start the conversation, as I mentioned, talk to other people, educate yourself, inform yourself, and then we have to demand change. This has got to stop, or you'll be next, or somebody you love.
Absolutely, and that's why I think shows like this and the work that you're doing, Ella, the information you're putting out as well, Karen. People like myself, I admitted at the start of the show, I came from a place where I thought this really was like something out of a movie, some kind of people being paranoid, maybe seeking attention. Didn't even have the slightest idea that this kind of thing went on. And then once you do see the information and you hear it and you listen to stories from people like both of you, and us doing shows like this and all the work we're doing, that gives information for others to kind of wake up to what's going on as well. And hopefully it's like a 100th monkey kind of scenario. Eventually we reach a tipping point where there are enough voices out there and we can get something changed about this. What do you think, Karen?
Well, I think so too. In fact, sometimes when people contact me and they're they're brand new to the situation, I will tell them, I say, this isn't great for you. I'm sorry it's happening to you. But the one good thing I can tell you is I think that it's not going to be that long before this breaks open. People understand that the government and other governments have been abusing their own population, and people are just not going to stand for it, and it's going to be forced to stop because they're not, something like this never stays a secret forever. And I think really relatively soon that it's going to be broken as a major news story, and these people are going to have to stop.
Absolutely. These crimes are just gone out of control. And as we talked about earlier, more and more people are coming out. And, we know that because of the power of information, the two most influential organizations in history are the government and the media. So there's enough good media and enough good, decent people in the government that we have to turn this around, and we have to be the ones that have the most power. And it really is power, strength in numbers. It really, truly is. So we just have to make the media aware and have other people like you, Kev, and letting us come up here and coming on your show and to talk about these horrible, horrific crimes that are going on that will only start to escalate. So we just need to get as many people as we can on our side.
Absolutely. This show is here for you both. Anytime there's any more information you need to get out. And we have to, come together, teamwork, and really double down in 2019. And get more information out there for the people. And you mentioned grounding, Ella, and I just started doing that last summer. We had a big heat wave over here, so I was going down the local green every day. And I made a point of taking the shoes off, taking the socks off. And it might sound really kind of new agey to people who are
hippie-ish, yeah,
but I swear, I've spoke about it a couple of times on the show when I was doing it. I absolutely love it. It's refreshing. It's so weird just connecting with the soil, especially living in a smart city. And for people out there who aren't in a smart city, that's coming your way as well. So it's a way of almost getting rid of all that kind of discharging some of the stuff we build up in us. Yeah,
and that's not even like hippie-ish or new agey. It's actually just scientific science. Yeah.
You've got the Schumann resonance of the planet.
Yeah, the Schumann. Yes.
Right.
You see, that's what I kind of think about, Karen, as well. We're electromagnetic beings, and when this planet, before all this technology, it was almost the optimum conditions for us. And you have to wonder about what's happening now. I mean, even the planet's resonance is changing. And then throw into the mix devices everywhere, 5G towers, you name it, on top of all the stuff we've been talking about tonight. It's a heck of a world we're living in.
It's getting worse. It's getting worse, and DNA damage is inevitable. So
it is with all this, with all this electrified planet that's not just with our energy. And oh goodness, I had a point. Hopefully it'll come back to me. But the good thing is there are very decent people, and also the one silver lining I have related to targeting is that I've met these wonderful people. I never would have met you, Kev. I would have never met Karen. I wouldn't even be on the radio if it wasn't for targeting. And I feel blessed to meet and speak with and fight with such incredible people.
And you've got your radio show over on YouTube as well, channel.
I do. I have that under Ella Free. And then my Whistleblower Hero shows is every Tuesday and Friday on Revolution Radio. And you get there by going to freedomslips.com. My Tuesday show starts at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and my Friday show starts at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. But I will be moving to, I think, iHeartRadio, as I might have mentioned earlier. And I bring on wonderful educators, too. Whistleblowers they mean everything to me. After getting to know several of them, and I've interviewed some of the top whistleblowers, and you guys can check it out if you want. It's on whistleblowerheroes.org. Some of the people I interviewed are phenomenal whistleblowers, and these are really courageous people like Karen that spoke out against the government and took the government on and have done amazing things.
No, absolutely. And I was looking down some of the people you've interviewed today, and if you like the Kev Baker Show and the topics we cover on here, I definitely urge you check out what Ella is doing. And I'll drop a link for that in the chat room before I leave tonight. But Karen, coming back to you as well, Where can people find more of your work so that they can keep up to date with what you're putting out there?
Well, right now, I would say that Romola D, who has her own everydayconcern.net site, has published several of my letters. I mean, what I do mostly is I try to figure out who to write to alert them to what's going on. And
Romola does tireless work. She does absolutely.
Her own work is absolutely phenomenal, just like Ella's. You know, I think these two ladies will go down in history as having chronicled the phenomenon to the best extent, to the most erudite audience. And their work is just going to be invaluable. It's just incredible, both of them. But Romola has been kind enough. I mean, Ella's interviewed me too, so she's got my story as well as and so many other people's. And Romola has allowed me to write some things and publish them, and then written some things in conjunction. And they can find a lot of what I've done on her site. And there are a couple articles that I wrote that oh my gosh, I'm trying to think of the name of it. Activist Post has published two of my articles. One of them is a letter to the New York Times in regard to their schizophrenic coverage of directed energy weapons. And another one is called American Zersetzung, where I basically take people from being a stunned individual, not knowing what's going on, and take them into the realization that they've been targeted. And so this is maybe a good article that somebody who finds themselves targeted can hand to a family member to say, I think this is what's going on with me. So it's kind of an intro to kind of ease people into it.
Karen, I was going to ask you, there's over 300 million people in the US. How many, and this is it's going to be speculation, obviously. I mean, I don't expect anyone knows the exact number, but roughly, I mean, how many people would you say are the victim of these kind of programs?
Oh, boy. I mean, they have got networks all over the world, and you realize, several of the targeted individuals have picked up and moved. And then when they find a new place to live and put down roots again, then they're absolutely stunned, shocked, and horrified to find that it hasn't taken any time whatsoever for it to start up again.
Mm-hmm. So myself and Dr. Karlstrom, we used to kind of speculate or estimate it must be in the millions. Literally millions of people around the world.
Around the world, yes. Yeah. I would say, and I'm saying it on the safe side, tens of thousands, maybe 100,000 at least.
Yeah, because I've kind of, right now I'm thinking 500,000, maybe more, with 4 to 5 million stalkers.
And like I say, when it comes to these stalkers, folks, on Ella's YouTube channel, you can see somebody challenged about being one of these stalkers, and he admits it. I think he says he's on the pay grade GS12, something like that. So people over in the US, that might mean something to you. And that's how blazing they are now. They don't even care. And of course, some of these stalkers must be ordinary people like us as well. So maybe another tactic we can try and use, Ella, is try to wake them up to what they're doing to people.
Yeah. Sometimes I wonder, though, to the normal ones that are not psychopaths, I really do. I mean, all you got to do is say, what if I was your wife? What if I was your daughter? What if I was your sister or mother? That's all. They just need to understand that we're human beings, and that maybe whatever their job is, they need to understand what's going on. And this will come back to you, if not in this life, another. So there's better things to do for money, and it's very saddening. And I do try to appeal to the human side, but I do understand psychopaths are wired very differently. And if you've seen scans of a psychopath's brain, it's evident in the scans. So it's, some people have no... Go ahead.
I want to thank both of you for sharing your stories on here tonight, for helping others out there as well, and already targeted. And doing stuff like this puts another target on people. So I can't thank both of you enough. And there's the music, folks. And I can't believe the show is finished already. This is definitely a subject we won't stop talking about on here. So until next time, wherever you are, make it TFR.